The library staff in Collingwood helped me and found me that information. I joined AA, and that's a picture of my grandmother, my mother's mother, and my mother, my first year in AA. She was the one person who showed me what love is supposed to look like. She was the one person that really loved me unconditionally and was completely supportive to my research and looking and trying to research diseases caused by chemicals. I don't know if I started thinking I could find a diet for disease control. I started with just to research the disease because I had no diagnosis and I had no name, and they made me feel like I didn't have a disease, and obviously I did. I mean, you can't fake green pus oozing out of your belly button and bleeding and infections. So, I mean, come on, people. Yeah, I say that to the people who in my family who said I was faking it. Bloody bitches. Yeah, women. Sometimes women treated me just as bad as the men. Anyway, I was able to get the help of a biochemist and owner of the Wasaga Beach drugstore, Mr. Mack, and he worked with me day and night when the store was not busy to understand the world of bugs and dust mite. Unlike my doctors, he presumed that if I was infecting so easily, I had allergies. I'd never heard about allergies. I didn't know what that meant. With his encouragement, I went back on my vegetarian diet. And in AA, I continued to attend meetings. And frankly, they were all wonderful. I was well treated, even though they were not able to relate to me, and I did not relate to their stories very well either. I never drank because I was shy. I did not have a shy bone in my body, but they made me feel loved and worth keeping alive. Even though I still had no memory of myself or what happened to me, I had the children, supported the police, fire department, and the entire community. I was not doing so bad in that old shack. Even though I had no running water, it had a little, and an outhouse. But the children made me happy to be alive, even if I could never work again. Someone got me on welfare. I don't remember who. This was a short-lived paradise. My mother insisted I return home, and after just a few months of being there in the middle of winter, with nothing on but a nightie, my father threw me out on the snow in a blizzard. A neighbor called Les Crow, a man in AA, and he came to my rescue. Les really turned himself inside out and backwards to try and get me well. He took me dancing, and even if I couldn't dance, he would just stand me up and make me shuffle. In 1985, I took several attacks, and Les rushed me to Sudbury and General Hospital. While in the emergency department, I have a vivid memory of a young, handsome Dr. Bodra giving me Benadryl, but warning it was not a cure and do not take it on a regular basis. He even put that on my chart. He told me I was chemically hypersensitive and drugs would have an adverse effect on someone like me. I was too ill to grasp what he meant fully, but I was curious after all these years of no diagnosis. How did he know that? And he said, I read a lot of American medical journals. At the time, that meant nothing to me. My brain was in too deep a fog. But I believe he planted a seed into my subconscious, and I thought I would try researching American journals too one day. April 1986, celebrating my 1 year sober, I took a paralyzing attack at an AA meeting with Tom Murphy, who was helping me, and Dan McIsaac picked me up and took me to his condemned house where he was living and took care of me. He just fed me coffee and water to detoxify me. I don't remember much, but I had two lovely men who really cared about me. That summer, 1985, Les took me to Manitoulin Island for clean air with his parents, and I went fishing and I caught a pickerel, I think it was. I was still sick all the time, though. There's Tom. He became my savior, my hero in AA. And there's Dan, who picked me up and carried me to his house. Can't call it a house, it was condemned. For somebody who was sober a couple of years, he wasn't doing very well. It was his gambling. He was a gambling addict. But nevertheless, we were so happy, and they took turns taking care of me. Tom took me to a convention at a beautiful lodge and bought me lovely clothes and made me look gorgeous. Then we spent a few weeks at my cabin in Wasaga Beach swimming and going to meetings all over Georgian Bay. Dan took me to a convention in Elliott Lake and Manitoulin Island. Sure, I was still very sick, but I was happy. And Dan was the one who came up with the idea to research diets for disease control. That had frankly not even occurred to me. He went to the health food stores and he brought home dozens of books to research my disease. However, before I had that opportunity, fate took another grotesque turn in my life. I had just barely started. I remember I should tell you about this. Dan was convinced that I could learn to write again, and I could learn to have memory again. He'd seen a lot of people with wet brain come out of it, or almost wet brain. He worked at the detox part-time after he sobered up. And he had me listen to country music and write down the words. And I remember crying and saying, "It hurts me, it hurts my brain, it's too hard." He said, "Take it one sentence at a time, babe, one sentence at a time." And slowly I did just that. And I was really not doing too bad. I actually had a little diet for disease control that helped several people in AA. Didn't do anything for me, but it helped them. And suddenly my welfare social worker demanded I see Dr. Brian Lynch as a family doctor or she would cut me off welfare. I complied, of course, terrified. This doctor was a psychotic, sociopathic maniac, and he deliberately went against Dr. Boudra's instructions. When I pleaded with him that I could not go on Benadryl daily, he threatened me, saying he'd cut me off welfare if I refused. After 2 months of being overdosed on Benadryl, I went into toxic shock syndrome with Benadryl, which I was now addicted to and could not get off. When I tried, I began to choke. Tom was trained in the mines for emergency care and managed to keep me breathing, massaging my throat. He called my mother, who called Dr. Lynch, and he said he had an environmentally safe room for me. He lied. All I remember is Tom being very angry that my mother was still listening to the same man who drugged me. She wheeled me into the hospital, parked me there in the lobby, and left me there. Another doctor, following Lynch's instructions, illegally incarcerated me into the mental ward to make sure I died, and he had my spring water removed from me. Dan had discovered I was allergic to chlorine and tap water, watching me take attacks if I drank it, and he had me on spring water. Lynch knew that without my water I'd go into cardiac arrest, and there would be no evidence of what he had done to me. And he was taking me cold turkey off the Benadryl, and that in itself would cause me to die. Yes, October 1986, Sudbury, Ontario General Hospital. The nurses, all except for one, were extremely callous and cruel, refusing to look up my records or report to Dr. Boudra. I was here. I lay there in the dark, choking, and that one nurse snuck into my room, my spring water. She was crying. She knew that what they were doing to me was wrong, she said. I lay there in the dark for hours when suddenly I had a vision. He looked familiar, but I was too sick to recognize him. He told me to get out of bed. Crawl if you must. There will be a long-distance call for you, and you must make sure that you take that call. I did exactly that. I rolled off the bed, and I crawled on my hands and knees. And those bitches taunted and teased me, calling me names, and at one point rage went through me like a volcano, and my voice returned, because up to then I hadn't been able to speak or defend myself. And I screamed at them, cursing them, saying, "You give me my long-distance phone call right now, or you bitches will be seeing jail time. I am here illegally. Get me to my goddamn feet, or what happened to those nurses at Toronto General will look like a picnic when my lawyers get through with you. Ah, it was another miracle. Elizabeth was one of my loyal real estate clients, and she'd had a vision herself. She knew my mother was somehow involved in doing me harm. Yes, I told her how my mother had followed that bastard Lynch's instructions, ignored my begging her not to do this to me, and she dumped me here in a wheelchair and just abandoned me, leaving me completely helpless with no one to protect me. Because don't forget, I not only couldn't walk, I couldn't stand, and I couldn't speak. She sent Tom home saying I'd be fine. Elizabeth told me she knew that and asked me to calm down and stop screaming, that would not help me, she said. So I shut up. Elizabeth had called Barbara Frum of the CBC television network in Canada wanting her to do a story on me, but Barbara said she did one on a woman like me in Barrie, Ontario, and her ratings went down. But if I died, I'd be a story. Oh, how I cursed that woman for a long time silently, and then I came to my sentence and played a role as if on stage. Oh, so Barbara Frum of CBC is going to do a story. And what they did to me here, eh? And if I'm not immediately released, she is sending her crew with cameras, and these bitches will all wind up in court with Dr. Lynch. Okay, sounds great. Okay, I'm leaving right now, and I'll call you when I get home. And if you don't hear from me in an hour, call the police and start having them all charged. Whoops. Oh, sorry. Got too excited there. Okay. Needless to say, they released me immediately. That one caring nurse gathered my things, helped me get dressed, wheeled me out to the lobby, and dialed Tom Murphy's number for me. He answered immediately, said he knew it. He knew it all along they were going to kill me. And he was cursing my mother. He picked me up and he drove me straight to Wasaga Beach to get me as far away from Sudbury as possible. And that's the shack, and where he had to leave me because he had to go back to work. From there, we called friends in Brantford who promised to help me. So Tom drove me there. They were very religious people who worked in the hospital in Kitchener, Ontario, whom I loved and trusted. Instead of trying to get me medical help, they were trying to get me a job and back to work. Tom had already left. I was dumbfounded at how stupid they could be. I can't even write. I can't walk. I can't read. How in hell am I supposed to work in this condition? We'll talk about it in the morning, he said. Time to go to bed as he helped me shuffle to stairs that led to the attic, and I wondered what in hell is going on. Slowly, in absolute agony, I crawled up those stairs on my hands and knees, and the children helped me to bed. I survived pain that is so horrific. It's the kind of pain that cancer patients go through if they're on morphine. A friend in the military took this picture. He wanted to document my agony. That was the Wilson gas mask that Tom had left me from the mines. It was rubber and it was toxic and it wasn't good, but it was better than nothing because I couldn't breathe. I stayed in my clothes and lay on that bed looking up at the ripped out ceiling. Oh my God, I thought, insulation is hanging loose. That is so toxic and it'll cause cancer to their children. And then I saw worse. The roof was full of mold. Quickly I realized if I stayed here, I'm going to die. I knew I had to get out and phone Tom to come back and get me, but he had just left. He would not yet be home. I began to weep, waiting to die, when another vision came towards me from the roof, slowly saying, "Trudy, it's me, Bob. I love you. Get up. You must get up. You cannot die. You have work to do. You must save these children. They are being poisoned." I whispered, not wanting to wake the children, "Bob, is that you?" "Yes, it's me. Now get up. You have to help me. I can't move. I can't do that. You have to do it yourself. I will stay with you, but you can do it. Bob Temple was my fiancé that had been killed by that drunk driver, October 29th, 1960. Yes, that afternoon he had picked me up on his motorcycle and driven me to Moonlight Beach, to our special place for picnics. He'd sat me down on a small hill overlooking the water, and he told me why we could not be married, that he was going to die soon. But he explained that I had to research my disease. He went on to warn me about my mother and Sudbury. And he pointed out that I could handle my father because he was so violent, I could see that coming, but that my mother would always do me the most harm. He said, she is sick. She is not sane, but you won't be able to recognize it because you've always taken care of her. She's never been your mother. She's always been your child. And he went on to tell me a horror story of my life to come, all of which I sat frozen listening to my life like it was going to be in a state of shock. The last thing he said was that my research into my disease would save millions of children 200 years from now, as they will be born like me. And that night we went from friends for the evening, and he whispered, and yes, that night he died. He gave me a light kiss when he left, and I was laying there remembering everything and reliving it as if it was happening all over again. Our relationship had been celibate. He knew about the rapes and wanted to give me back my virginity so we would not have sex until our wedding night. It was also his way of proving to me how much he loved me. And not my body, but me. When he didn't return, I wasn't worried, because Bob would go silent like that sometimes. I always felt safe with him. But it was the next day that he was found dead. Yes, he had been decapitated. They found his bleeding head several feet away. I think barbed wire fences were common then. I think they're banned now. Truth is, I'd been so traumatized by his death, I never remembered much of what he told me until now, except I knew I was not dreaming, or was I? I could see and hear him. It was real. I begged him to help me, but he said he did not have that kind of power, assuring me I could do it myself. He told me, you will be okay. I love you. I'm going to lead you to a place where someone will come to help you. He is on his way and he will help you survive. If you don't go, you will die. You are not meant to die now. You must get up. I love you. Roll off the bed and crawl and get out of here. Someone is coming to help you. And I did as Bob told me to do. He hovered above me like a mist and kept talking to me to keep me going, keep me from passing out. Every second, every inch was unbearable agony, but I just kept crawling, slowly as he kept talking to me, telling me he loved me, and someone was coming to help me. I made it down the stairs, through the living room, the kitchen, pulled myself up to my feet by the door handle to the hall. I dressed slowly, the agony of every movement, excruciating, drowning pain. Tom had made sure I'd be warm. I wore my down-filled purple coat, fox hat, muff, and wool mittens. Slowly opening the door and choking back tears, shuffled my way outside. Once I hit the cold October chilly air, it felt lovely, as the wind whipped around my cheeks, as if loving caresses were from Bob. He stayed with me every agonizing step of the way. Slowly I shuffled, choking, coughing, and then stopping so I could breathe. My heart beat pounding in my head like a drum. Bob kept me calm by just saying he loved me and someone was coming to help me. When I saw the sign of a Tim Hortons donut shop, he said, "There, that is where you must go. It is not far now." Perhaps it was about 3 blocks away. Don't know for sure, but it felt like 100 miles of agonizing pain. Every step was like carrying 1,000 pounds on my back. Once I got to the door, it was too heavy. I could not open it, asking Bob to help. Again he repeated what he had told me over and over, that he didn't have that kind of power. He told me, you have to scream for help, which I did, and then he slowly vanished into the night's dark sky. How long did I wait? I don't know, except to say sometime later a very tall policeman came in and asked, Is there anyone here that is sick and needs help? Well, by this time, on my third cup of coffee, I'd had my speech back and had told everyone what happened. Truck drivers, taxi cab drivers, people on the night shift all waited to see who was coming to rescue me. So before I could speak, they all pointed, "Yeah, she is." He sat down next to me and we talked for a long time. He shared with me his story about his dead brother who had died due to medical negligence just like mine. He said that he had not believed his brother who begged him for help, trusting the doctors. After he died, he regretted it, so he began to research outside of Canada in the United States. He discovered the terminology chemical hypersensitivities was rampant and growing in leaps and bounds to each generation because we are being systemically poisoned. He explained to me Benadryl killed his brother. He now knew that, and he told me how to wean off it safely. He had no cure for me, only that American agencies had all kinds of science that Health Canada was ignoring. I called them murderers. Yes, he said, they murdered my brother. He described how he got to me. After finding out the truth about what killed his brother, he began to pray that God would send him someone to help. If he could not save his brother, if he could just save one other person, he would feel not so sick about not helping his brother. His guilt was ruining his life. He was on duty driving his car in Mississauga when his brother came to him in a similar vision as mine.